Okay, let's say you go to the store and you buy a circular cut of metal, or maybe it's a rug, but I'm going to say a circular cut of metal, and let's color it in pink or whatever. Um, and what we know is that the circumference of this piece of metal that we just purchased, right? The circumference is equal to 14 pi, right, meters. So we have this measurement of the circumference in terms of pi. Let me just fill that in. Okay. So what we want to know here is what's the radius? What's the diameter? And just for fun, what's the area of this piece of metal right here? So what do? Well, again, the circumference is just the distance around the circle, right? The perimeter. And what we can do is, or we can say is, if you take the diameter of the circle and you triple it in length, or multiply it by about pi, that's the circumference. So that means, of course, that, oops, wrong tool, that the circumference is equal to whatever your diameter is, times about 3, or pi. So here, when you're given that the circumference equals 14 times pi, and we know that the circumference is equal to the diameter times pi, that means our diameter has to equal 14, right? It's almost as if this number is just being plugged in for d. And that the radius is half the diameter divided by 2, and that equals 7. And that the area of a circle, of course, is equal to about 3 radius squares. So r squares times pi. And again, that means if you take a radius square, which is just a square, where each side of the square is the radius of the circle, and we were to fill this in and say, okay, how many squares that are as long on each side as the radius will it take to fill up this whole circle? Well, it's a little bit more than 3. It's about pi squares. This right here is, of course, a radius square, right? So about a little more than 3 of those radius squares. So in this case, what's the area of the circle in terms of pi? Well, if the radius is 7, and we have to square the radius to find the area, we get 49 times pi. All right, hope that helped.